Thank you for the opportunity to speak on that conference on cultural astronomy. I am Susanne Hoffmann, a trained historian of science, and with that background, I launched a project of an all skies encyclopedia last year, which I now want to introduce to you. I call it All Skies Encyclopedia as it is based on an older project by two amateur astronomers in Vienna that was called the Ancient Skies Project. And I want to broaden this idea now and make it also useful for purposes of the IAU and also useful for people from all sorts of humanities, of the cultural astronomy, who may want to publish their data in a proper common data publication. That is why I started this project that is closely linked to the IAU Working Group on Star Names. And this venture of naming stars is a rather new venture of the IAU that is based on the idea that all humanity lives under one sky, and that we want to make this visible in the names of the sky. The constellation names are fixed since the 1920s now, so for almost 100 years. But in names of other celestial bodies, we are able to represent all or many other cultures. And that is why the IAU basically needs a huge repository where all this cultural data is stored. The IAU Working Group on Star Names, in particular, was created by astrophysicists with a wish of naming stars to make it easier at conferences of astrophysics to speak about exoplanets and distant worlds, rather with names of the stars than telephone numbers. And the IAU also wishes to preserve the heritage of the cultures by using cultural names, which of course also includes all the permissions that we may need to not only collect this cultural data, but also use it in a new context when we, as the IAU, create new cultures in the sky. But anyway, so the idea is to collect the material from which we can draw. And before we can ask any culture if we may be able to use their data, we need to collect the data and we need to know the data. And that is why a huge and comprehensive data collection would be needed for that. The history that I come from in my field is the history of dictionaries on names in the sky, names of stars, constellations, all sorts of asterisms that we find. And in particular for the cuneiform texts, which are two languages, Akkadian and Sumerian, there had been some dictionaries since roughly 1950. The first attempt was made by Felix Gößmann, a German archaeologist, and he published a dictionary on Babylonian cuneiform names in the sky and called it Planetarium Babylonicum. To remember his huge efforts and this very long-lasting project, we now take up this naming and name our dictionaries of ancient and indigenous sky cultures, also planetarium something, and then the word for the culture. This is at least for the European or Eurasian cultures that allow this Latin reference in their name. Then Kurtik, in 2007, a Russian scholar, published a book in Russian, which is hardly used in our field because it's published in Russian only, unfortunately. But this is why on which our recent work is based. The project was created in Jerusalem in 2018 or so, by professors Kurtik and Horowitz, and I joined in 2020 with my background in planetarium work. As a trained planetarian, a person who works in planetariums, I do not only have the background in history, but also wish to share this knowledge with a broader public. And for educational purposes, I already had made some uranographies in planetarium software for the dome representation, usually in Zeiss software, for the planetariums in Berlin, Münster, and Jena in Germany, and some attempts of planetarium didactics for it in the planetarium of Königsleiten, Austria. With that background, we then started to contribute this data, these sky cultures, to Stellarium. In particular, I contributed the developments that I did for the planetarium in Münster to didactical reduction, 2 layers of Babylonian uranographies. There had been more, but for didactical purpose, it's sufficient to divide that into the historical epoch before the invention of the zodiac and after the invention of the zodiac. So apparently, obviously, the Babylonian culture was not stable over time, as all the other cultures also were not stable over time, but were changed. And the Babylonian sky culture, we didn't leave it there, was also consulted, not only created by myself, in any little chamber somewhere in the middle of nowhere, but also consulted by some professors of archaeology, Professor Krabernick in Jena, Professor Hunger in Vienna, and Professor Galberg in Oklahoma, whose wife has also drawn the constellations that we show in Stellarium. An Egyptian colleague of mine in Jena organized an exchange program of the computer science department, of some colleagues in the computer science department. And being in Egypt, I was also consulted by some Egyptologists there. And then also some students of mine contributed a Greek sky culture based on the text written in the Almagest. And also then we, with some other professors, developed some derivatives of that for the medieval times, like the Almagest derivative given in Dante's Divine Commedia, and other medieval texts. And this similar attempts have been made for the Chinese sky cultures by Boshun Yang, Dr. Yang in Hefei, China. And also we in Stellarium, of course, have some, and also some Australian and sky cultures and from other indigenous peoples all over the world. But in almost all cases, these are sort of didactical reductions in the way that there's only one way of telling the stories or explaining, giving the constellations, and not all the variants, because we don't have the room for that in Stellarium. For historical purpose and for the purpose of studying the societies, the cultures, and so on, it would make sense to have all the data and to compare them. For various reasons, I have given several talks and presentations during the last 10 years showing these flipping images where we historians really can prove how over the course of the centuries the constellations were changed. It was always called the same way. The term with which a specific area was maybe named the same way, with the same deity or animal, but the image that they drew was changed over time due to different religious contexts or different context, changes in the society, in how they practiced specific rituals and so on. And this is known for a long time. So we need this also not only for educational purpose, but also for research purposes. And in 2023, finally, I got everything together. I got the right people in the IAU to collect this data and to contribute this data. I got some funding by the Austrian Academy of Science and support by the Faculty for Computer Science in Jena, and also, of course, by the Stellarium team. And then we created this new project of the All Skies Encyclopedia as a separate encyclopedia, not included in Stellarium, but you can call it from the browser and read all the texts separately. I mean, from the internet, starting with the Planetarium Babylonicum 2.0, the digital version based on Kurtik's and Horowitz's work. And then also extended to other cultures. We learn for the Babylonian cultures. We also, of course, learn a lot from the other contributions by colleagues in China, Iraq, Iran, and Saudi Arabia and India, and so on. So with all these different approaches, we now develop a format how to present all these data, all this information, and we systematically register more and more names. We work on this project now. We have been working on this only for a year. The cuneiform dictionary is almost complete. We are still working on that, probably for another year or two. And then the mythologies want to be added. So we want to add them, but this will be another big extra project. Also, for that, probably, hopefully, the IAU Office for Astronomical Outreach may join us. What we already have is a small link to Stellarium, because there is this neat query tool in Stellarium that my dear colleague Georg Zotti has developed some years ago. And this allows us also to query the All Skies Encyclopedia. As far as data is stored there, then you can request it, can query it from inside Stellarium. That's already possible now and will be developed further. And as I said, the data in the encyclopedia will grow. My students in Jena and in Bali, on the island of Bali in Indonesia, develop tools to make it easier for the researchers, for cultural astronomers and historians to contribute their data. Please check this very pretty poster by my Balinese pre-doc fellow, Yola Ascarula. She has a poster here at that conference that she made a little browser tool with which we can contribute the data and then store it locally and later manually contribute it to Stellarium. But some other students of mine in Jena now during a one semester software development project developed a similar a plugin for Stellarium with similar features. This will come soon, hopefully in September. If not, then maybe in December, because the project for them is already almost done. It's now only a matter of the Stellarium team to check it. And also, a bachelor student of mine is developing a new selection menu for the cultures, so that the user will be able to select a culture from a map of the Earth instead of from a long list of names in which most of the people will probably not know where exactly the name is located on Earth. Then we will have to deal with some technical problems like mirroring our data to other servers, merging the tangible and intangible collections of heritage, of astronomical heritage. With many servers, we will have the need for load balancing, and much more. But all this will be solved within the next couple of months. And with that, I thank you for the attention and invite you for questions. Thank you.